What's up YouTube? Today I want to show you my process for creating seemingly random yet programmed glitchy synth loops. Let's dive in and have a look. So for this video, I'll mainly be using Vital to generate the sounds, and then we can process them in various ways. You could either kind of chop the stuff or use a plugin called Infiltrator, which I'll get to a little bit later. There's various ways you could do this. If you've got really nice wavetables, something like Dadda Wavetables V3 has a couple of really good stuff in there in the glitch section. That being said, we could do that, and that would be a very quick video, just loading a wavetable, adding some things and doing that. Although I want to show you a really cool technique that I've picked up lately for creating some pretty wild sounding wavetables. So the idea is we want to put an LFO on the pitch. We're just going to start with the init saw wave. I want to set this phase randomization to 0, okay? And then we're going to set the LFO onto the pitch like this. And here we want to set this to seconds. So the idea here is we're going to set another LFO to modulate the speed of this LFO. And what that does is it's going to give us a kind of siren type of effect. So let's just drag this LFO2 over here. And then the idea is to jump back to LFO2 and then put in a shape that's something like this. And we can change the time. And then let's jump back to LFO1 and we might just want to adjust the time here as well. So a pretty basic saw wave siren sweep type of thing. We could go ahead and adjust the smooth parameters and fine tune these to get like different sounds in the wavetable. The core sound that I'm going for is this phase disperse mode here. So when this is on a saw wave, it creates a particularly kind of like wobbly type of effect, which I think is really cool. So we could modulate this in interesting ways using some of these LFOs. Let's maybe do a combination of both of these LFOs. So notice how the pitch is going up from the center. I want to set this LFO to the one that's on this pitch over here. I want to set this to bipolar modulation, so it's going above and below the 0 through 0 modulation. So do you hear that weird lasery effect that we're hearing now? So the idea now is we want to resynthesize preset to wavetable. And what that's going to do is it's going to write that kind of sounds automation into a wavetable. And interesting things start to happen because we've modulated that pitch. Is we've kind of created different FM shapes, different FM tones using this technique. Check this out. Some pretty wild tones that you can get from this technique. So the idea here is I want to use a compressor. So this compressor that's built into Vital is not very far from something like OTT, which really kind of like brings out the very low parts of the sound. So in, for example, these frames, which there wasn't much going on, but we did still have that kind of ringy tone, we're going to hear a lot more of that frame now if we modulate this. What I want to do is I want to set up a random to modulate this wavetable position. But to get the most kind of glitchy sound, let's go with a sample and hold on 16ths. So there's various ways we can go about actually using the sound in context. What I want to do here is I kind of want to create a loop that I can bounce out and use in various different tracks. How I would go about doing that is I don't want this to sample and hold on the 16ths. I want to create a note on random. So if you didn't know, if you haven't seen my very long Vital video, each of the randoms can be a note on random as well if you just set it to freeze. And so now what happens is each time we put in a note, it's going to randomly generate a new wavetable position for us. So this allows us to create slightly longer bits, but also create gaps in between them that'll just make life easier for resampling and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to put in a whole bunch like this. Just fill up the whole bar with a gap in between. Let me just solo this and let's have a listen to what we've created. So here's where I like to get a little bit experimental. Let's use Infiltrator. If you don't know, I've done a video on this plugin as well. You don't particularly have to use Infiltrator. There's various other like free options. Buffer override is really good. I just like the way that this is just so easy to get this kind of thing going. So I've set it to looper mode, and then this parameter here becomes the speed of a retrigger parameter. This, what I'm doing here, is setting an LFO, and we can then randomize that kind of shape to kind of get varying kind of like different looper positions. So here I've set it up so that we've got like 8 different instances of this looper, and the sequencer is basically switching between them every bar. Now I want to jump in and randomize the shape that each of them has, and we can get some varying kind of like loops of different glitchy sounds going by doing this. Okay, so bear with me. I know this sounds ridiculous at this point, but once we get this nice kind of mud pie or cherry pie or whatever you want to call it, once we get this nice chunk of glitchy audio rendered, then the trick comes in. So I'm sure you can do the similar things in Bitwig or Ableton or whichever DAW you're using. What I want to do is I want to load this into a sampler track and cut it on every eighth or every note that we trigger. So actually, that's every one quarter. So every quarter note, we want to chop that so that we can play in melodies of different glitches. So let's say right click and say create sampler track. Here we can say slice, we can say grid, and then we can choose the grid size up at the top here, 1/4. And I believe that sliced the entire thing into chunky, glitchy samples. And now it's about like just as simple as just randomly putting in some triggers in the MIDI, and we should have some nice glitchy patterns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put this like this. Let me create a rhythm by just duplicating this a bunch of times. Let me use my Cubase macro to randomly mute some of these notes, and then we are going to move some of them up and down in pitch. And this is not actually changing the pitch. This is just changing which of those glitchy samples is being triggered at what time. Anyway, so I'm just going to randomly do this. We're going to see how it sounds, experiment a little bit. Okay, so we may have to jump in there and edit the envelopes just so that we don't have these kind of like overlaps here. Okay, so if I mean, this doesn't always happen, but I mean, if, for example, you've got it in a case like this where it sounds slightly out of tune, you could always use something like a resonator to kind of get it more in tune. So we could either go with something like Rift Feedback Lite, or we could go with something like Kilohertz Resonator, whatever you feel like. So I believe this track is in G sharp, so I'm just going to tune this to G sharp. Awesome. That is about it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to my channel and hitting that like button. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.